wishing you good whatever time you have, morning, afternoon, evening. So Zoom greetings to all of you. It is our honor to have Professor Samira Sheikh with us today for this annual lecture. Many of you have been part of the Association for the Study of Finance for over a decade now. Some of you have been attending our regular lectures, quarterly lectures, annual lectures. So you know that this has been the tradition for now 5 years that we have these annual lectures where we invite a prominent speaker from the academic setting to talk about the Ginans and the context of the Ginan. In today's talk, we have invited Professor Samira Sheikh, who is a historian and teaches South Asian history actually at Vanderbilt University. Many of you would remember her from her time at the IIS. She was with the IIS as a research associate in Department of Academic Research and Publication then, now Department of Academic Research. And she lectured at the graduate program, JIPISH, and she was with us from 2004 to 2009. During this time, she co-edited an anthology of Ismaili literature, A Shii Vision of Islam, which was published in 2008, and completed her first book, Forging a Region, Sultans, Pilgrims, and Traders in Gujarat, 1200 to 1500. A brilliant work. If you've not come across it, I would suggest pick it up, read. The scholarship has moved on, and Samira herself has taken this field much further now and is considered to be the authority for the Sultanate period and especially Gujarat region. I remember she organized a conference entitled The Devotional Expressions of South Asian Muslims. This was in 2006, November 2006. And that conference had multiple panels on Ginans. And in fact, that exhibition that accompanied it also had multiple Ginan manuscripts. And for those who are not familiar with the field and the institute, there was no South Asian studies then. And doing something like this was quite ahead of the time. I would say she was the one who kind of sowed the seeds of South Asian studies that I had today at the IIS. So, and I owe, I think, yes, a big gratitude, Samira, to you, because I remember you invited me, and at that conference, I presented a paper on patronage and printing and how, some printers received the official patronage and some did not. That later became my PhD topic. In fact, that's what my PhD is on. So for me, my headship at the IIS in South Asian Studies, my PhD, a lot of it is owed to Samira's time at the IIS. She also co-edited a volume of essays with Francesca Orsini. I mean, I'm sure you all know Professor Francesca Orsini from SOAS. She was in the news for all wrong reasons recently. But she co-edited this volume with Francesca, titled After Timur Left, published in 2014. She has recently completed a book on the British victory over the last Nawab of Bharuch. For those who don't know this period, it's quite fascinating. Bharuch is the region where we had a lot of cotton produced, and British had their interest. They established a factory. And then the story goes, like around 1772, that the Britishers kind of threw over the Bharuch, Nawab of Bharuch, and took over the Bharuch. So I'm looking forward to this, in fact, reading this book, British Victory Over the Last Nawab of Bharuch, tentatively titled Losing the Little Kingdom. At present, she is the 5th Obaid Siddiq Chair at the archives at NCBS in Bangalore, India, where she's researching a book on maps and the mapping of Gujarat and the Indian Ocean. Recently, I was talking to Dr. Roy Fischel, and he said that I envy Samira. That's such a fascinating topic and subject that she's working on. I wish I could do this. So, Samira, there are quite a few people who are envious of your, recent role in Bangalore. In fact, I'm looking forward to kind of the output of this project. Um, However, we are not talking maps today. Today's presentation is based on her article. She wrote this article in 2018, and we have had a couple of discussions after this. Samira and I have discussed that. Uh, the topic, the article was the Mughal Emperor Aurangzeb and his relationship with Shia communities. And now this goes back to 2006 when we started discussing a possibility that some of the manuscripts disappeared because Aurangzeb was in Gujarat as a governor and was harassing Shias, and that included Nizari Ismaili Shias. And that's where this conversation goes back to as old as like 20 years now. Um, and that article, as well as the forthcoming article titled The Mathia Rebellion and Religious Categories in Early Modern Gujarat. So today's talk is based on her one published article and one forthcoming article. And very soon the audience will realize that there is a reason why the Association for the Study of Ginans has decided to bring up this topic and discuss this. And who better than Professor Samira Sheikh to deal with this topic? For those who don't know, she has authored a brilliant piece on Ginan literature, which is available on the IIS website. So if you have not read that piece, please do read that piece. In that piece, I think it was published in 2008, if I'm not wrong. She mentioned that nobody has studied Quran and Ginan and Puranic influences on the Ginan. And as late as a month ago, Samira, we finally managed to find somebody at Oxford who is willing to work on this topic. And we have already issued a contract to him, and we do hope to see this work kind of coming to light. But I just wanted to I use that as an example for the audience to know that Samira's interest in Ginan goes back to decades, and her passion for this subject has always been there, and she's influenced many of us to study this topic at some depth. So thank you very much, Samira, for accepting our invitation. I thank you to start with on behalf of the Association for the Study of Ginans. I'm one of the volunteers in the association, and we have the chairman online as well. And I extend my welcome on behalf of the ASG and ASG chairman, Mr. Shiraz Pradhan, and all the members of the ASG. It's our honor, privilege to have you with us today, and we look forward to listening to you. What we'll do is we'll listen to you for some time, and then we'll open up the platform for the audience to ask questions, and we'll take it further from there. So the floor is yours, Samira.
Thank you, Hussein. That was an extraordinarily generous and kind introduction. And it really reflects the fact that Hussein and I have been talking, as he said, for more than 20 years. And I have to say that I'm also remembering at this moment the start of this organization when Mr. Pyareli Jiva, got a lot of us together to start thinking about the study of the Ginans as a systematic and deeply serious activity. So this is a moment to go back also to thinking about the origins of the association itself. I am going to speak today on a slightly different title than the one that was advertised, but I think Hussein's introduction reminds me of my original title, which was Threads of Light. And I want to invoke at this moment the threads of light that connect the Ismaili tradition, the Satpanthi tradition, connect all of us, connect the chains of teacher and students, friends and colleagues. And we realize that these threads stretch across the world and stretch across very long periods of time. I would like to recall also my dear friend and mentor, the late Zawahir Moer, who passed away in February 2024. And I could not have entered this field of Ghanan studies, understood Ismaili history without her constant guidance for almost 3 decades. And I want to point anybody who is interested in the Satpanthis and the Imam Shahis of Pirana, which is a topic that I will be speaking on today, to her absolutely indispensable article, which I have placed on the screen before you. Zawahir is much missed. This is also a moment to recall the many different Ghanan conferences that I have had the privilege of attending. And one of them, and Hussein will will laugh because this is we were all much younger in those days, 2004. This was in Rajkot, and it's an opportunity to recall and mention some of my other teachers who have been part of this process, not just Mr. Jiva, but also Tazim Qasim, Francoise Malesson, and Michelle Bovan, and Balwant Jani, who are all in here. They are not my only teachers in this field, but uh, uh, I thought to mention them at this moment. Right. So turning to the story that I would like to tell today. It is the story of Sayyid Shahji, who lived in the um shrine of Pirana near Ahmedabad in Gujarat in the 1670s and 1680s. He was the direct descendant of Sayyid or Pir Imam Shah, whose tomb is shown over here in an old photograph. It doesn't look like this anymore. Um, and the story that will unfold is the story of his life and his death. Now, Sayyid Shahji was once in 1685, he was summoned to Ahmedabad to be questioned by the Emperor Aurangzeb's officials. He did not at first go to Ahmedabad, he resisted, but the emperor's men arrived at Pirana, arrived at his doorstep, arrested him, and took him to Ahmedabad. After that, he was supposed to be taken for cross questioning the next day, but when his captors came to find him, they found that he had passed away. We do not know how he died, but he may have decided to take his own life. When this news percolated out into the world, his followers, the followers of Imam Shah, the followers of Sayyid Shahji, who were across Gujarat, across even Maharashtra and Madhya Pradesh, they erupted in just this huge rage and anguish at the death of their teacher, their preceptor, and they started to march towards Ahmedabad to seek justice in Sayyid Shahji's name. When they were coming towards Ahmedabad, if as they were moving north towards Ahmedabad, they captured the city of Bharuch, which is both a fort and a port, and they defeated the Mughal fort administrator, and they maintained their own rule over this city for about 10 days. Eventually, the Mughal emperor, that's Aurangzeb, he sent a huge number of troops, including war elephants and war horses, and the Matiyas, and that's the followers of Sayyid Shahji, were eventually defeated and killed. It was a terrible massacre that resulted in response to their takeover of the fort. The Sayyid Shahji, when he lived in Pirana, he did not come out and mingle with his followers on a regular basis. In fact, the story goes that he would live behind a curtain, behind parda, and he would stick his foot out from the curtain. And when his followers came, they would put gifts on his feet. And this can be read in two ways. This is a form in which he was keeping himself in seclusion, but it can also be a form of thinking about the batini aspect of the Imam Shahi and Satpanthi belief system, that the truth is hidden by a curtain, the truth is open only to people who are true believers, who go through the rituals and practices of learning about the truth, right? Um, so he's a slightly mysterious figure, but he had this great hold over his followers, and that resulted when he died suddenly in this huge outpouring of grief and rage. Um, Now, who was Sayyid Shahji? As I said before, he was the direct descendant um, of Sayyid Imam Shah, who in the Satpanthi tradition and the Ismaili tradition is, of course, known as Pir. Imam Shah himself was the son of Pir Hassan Kabir Din. And he came from Sindh to Gujarat roughly in the 1520s, 1530s. And he established himself in the region of Gujarat. He was given a village, the village of Pirana, to live in and to practice his faith. And he was responsible for bringing a lot of the local people around the area of Ahmedabad, around the area of Gujarat, within the fold of the Satpanth. And his descendants continue to live there. Now, here you see very quickly genealogy, a shajara, in which you see that Pir Imam Shah was the descendant of Pir Sadruddin via Pir Hassan Kabiruddin, and it was several generations later that we see Sayyid Shahji. Now, what is the Satpanth itself? Again, to this audience, I do not need to explain what is the Satpanth, but I just wanted to bring to your attention some of the ways in which prominent scholars of Ismaili history, of Satpanthi history, have articulated what is the Satpanth and what are the slight differences in the way they articulate this tradition. Um, the Satpanth is considered to be a South Asian expression of Ismaili Islam, in the words of Ali Asani. It's considered to be a tradition that is rooted in the Nizari Ismaili tradition. However, it's considered to be a regional tradition, in the words of Azim Nanji. And in the words of Zawahir Moir, it is a multi-layered religious tradition which reflects interaction between Ismaili traditions as well as the poetic and devotional cultures of Western India. So that's the tradition that we are going to be enmeshed in the next 30 minutes or so. And that's the tradition, of course, that Sayyid Shahji belongs to. Now, what is the context of the events that I'm going to describe in some detail, right? So here is a map for you of Gujarat. You see the capital of Gujarat is Ahmedabad. Ahmedabad and the entire, the whole of South Asia was at that time ruled by the Mughals, and the ruler in charge was the famous or infamous ruler Aurangzeb. We see over here that the capital is Ahmedabad. Pirana is literally a few miles outside Ahmedabad. And you see that Bharuch, where a lot of the action I'm going to be describing, is to the south of Ahmedabad. And Bharuch is on the north bank of the river Narmada. Now, in the 1680s, when the events that I will describe are going to take place, Gujarat was one of the richest provinces of the Mughal Empire. It was a place that was humming with trade and commerce. There was traders from all over the world were coming to the great ports of Gujarat. There was a huge amount of trade. The trade revenues and the customs duties that were generated from the Gujarati trade were really had a big impact on the Mughal Empire's running ability to function. And so Gujarat is a very important place for the Mughals, for Aurangzeb, and he needed to make sure there was peace and security there. But it was also a very important place for many kinds of traders, including Dutch, British, Arab, Turkish, French, and so on. Right. So this is where a lot of the world's commerce was actually being carried out. Now, this prosperity was all very well, But it is almost as though that prosperity was under a cloud, because one of the reasons was that the Mughal Emperor Aurangzeb, he just had a very strong belief that people in his kingdom who did not conform to the kind of Islam that he himself practiced and that he believed that others should practice, he had this intolerance towards these different ways of practicing Islam, practicing belief. And while many people have talked about Aurangzeb's intolerance towards Hindus, I have argued in that article that Hussein very kindly mentioned that we could in fact say that Aurangzeb's hostility was actually more towards Shia communities, Ismaili communities, and communities who have a kind of millenarian belief, a belief that at the day of judgment that the Imam or Mahdi will come back and will establish justice in the world. Right. So we see that Aurangzeb is very suspicious of communities and whose practices do not conform to what he likes. And this has been the case since the 1640s. That's generation before this time that I'm going to describe, when he was a governor of Gujarat. And at that time, he had encountered the Sayyidna, the Dai of the Bohras, who was named Qutub Khan, Sayyidna Qutbuddin. And he had summoned, in a very similar way to Sayyid Shahji, he had summoned the Dai, he had him cross-questioned by his own um, officials, his religious officials, and at the end of that cross-questioning, he had Sayyidina Qutbuddin executed. So Sayyidina Qutbuddin becomes a martyr in the eyes of the Bohra community, and that was carried out on the orders of Aurangzeb. So when Sayyid Shahji receives this summons, and he is told to appear before the officials of Aurangzeb in Ahmedabad, surely he would have known that he might meet the same fate as Sayyidina Qutbuddin. He would have known that his form of religious belief, his practices, the practices of his followers, all of those would come under a lot of scrutiny from the emperor's officials. And so this was a very, very dangerous moment for him. And in some ways, and this goes back to a conversation I had with Zawahir 20 years ago, where I was saying, how do we know how he must have felt at that time, when he's imprisoned in Ahmedabad and ready to be cross-questioned. And according to Zawahir, he took the decision to take his own life because he wanted to protect his community. He wanted to protect the secrets of the community and not subject them to persecution by the emperor's officials. So this is the cleric who was responsible for the cross-questioning of the Bohra Sayyidna in the 1640s. His name was Qazi Abdul Wahab, and he was actually from a ex-Ismaili community. He was from the region of Palanpur. Right. So what do we know about Sayyid Shahji's followers, and what do we know about them that they would erupt in such anger and grief when they heard about the death of their leader, their teacher? We know that in the 1600s, the 1700s, there seemed to be three major communities or branches of the Satpanth within Gujarat. And they were geographically divided roughly. And towards the north were the Momnas or the Momins. Towards the west in the Saurashtra, Kathiawar, Kutch region, we have the Khwajas, who of course are known as the Khojas. And towards the south and southeast of Gujarat, we have this community known as the Matiyas. Now, these are the communities who had the greatest allegiance to Sayyid Shahji, to Imam Shah, who had this very deep belief in the Satpanth, and who formed a very large number of people who had this allegiance towards the Imam Shahi Satpanthi form of belief. According to most sources, we hear that they were mostly farmers. Some of them were vegetable sellers. Some of them were peasants. Most of them came from fairly modest backgrounds. Yeah, they weren't the kind of traders or big business people that we associate with the Khojas at a later stage. They tended to be from fairly modest and peasant kind of backgrounds. So the story of the rebellion of the Matyas that happens in 1685. This is the story in which Bharuch was captured by the Matyas after the death of Sayyid Shahji. I wanted to look at that very closely, and I have had the opportunity to do so and to reconstruct the story of what happened under in 1685. I've had the opportunity to do so from a range of different sources, and some of them are published in my article, both the old one and the forthcoming one. But there's yet another source that I found very recently, and I really wanted to share the findings with you because to me, it's another demonstration of those threads of light that connect the Satpanth and connect the ways in which people find their belief systems, their lives to be connected in a form of belief that goes through centuries and across a lot of differences of class and community and so on. Now, what is this new evidence? This new evidence comes from the eyewitness account of a Dutchman, or maybe a bunch of Dutchmen, who were actually inside the fort of Bharuch when the uh, Matyas, that is the followers of Sayyid Shahji, captured the fort. And so day to day, they were actually eyewitnesses to what is going on by the Matyas and how they are expressing their religious belief, but also what is the way in which they are actually carrying themselves, conducting themselves within that 10-day period. So it's almost like this eyewitness account by these Dutch men gives us a sort of micro history, an eyewitness account from an outsider, from somebody who's not Muslim, who's not Indian, who knows nothing about the Satpanth, but they were able to get this information together. And it's a really remarkable account that I'm going to share with you for the first time. So why are Dutch people sitting in Bharuch in the first place? Now we have to remember around the year 1600, that is around 80, 85 years before these events take place, the Dutch East India Company, which is the abbreviation is VOC, that was formed in order to trade with the East. And initially, in the first 100 years or so, the Dutch really emphasized trading with Gujarat and with Western India. And so they established a bunch of factories on the western coast of India. Now, these factories are not places where things were made. They were places where things were bought and sold. And at Bharuch, the main commodity that was being bought and sold was cotton cloth. Also indigo, also saltpeter, which is used for armaments, also ghee, also various other goods were produced and bought and sold, but cotton was by far the most important commodity. So that's why there is a factory, a Dutch factory in Bharuch, and that's why these Dutch guys are sitting there, and they're probably really scared as what's going to happen to them. They're really anxious because trade is being disrupted around them. They are not able to communicate with their superior officers who are in Surat, who are in other parts of South Asia. And so they are writing very clear and very detailed accounts of what is going on so that if something is to happen to them, that information would be recorded, right? So we are very lucky that we have this eyewitness account. And we are able to access it. So what do they tell us about what is going on in Bharuch? Now, here's where I'm going to take a step back and think about how scholars have understood what is the Satpanth, what is the ways in which the Satpanth have been written about in the scholarly literature. I gave you some examples of how scholars have treated it. But basically, despite the incredible and important work of all these scholars that I quoted, the Satpanth has been seen as a very kind of niche tradition, something that is a minority tradition. That is something that is, well, Ismailis are interested in it, but it's not of much interest to the wider world or to the history of South Asia or to the history of the Indian Ocean. It's something that's kind of quite minor. So I'm going to try to question that assumption about the Satpanth in this talk, because I'm going to argue that because Satpanthis and Ismailis had to constantly hide their belief and their practices because there was persecution from people like Aurangzeb, that is why they were forced to keep their records very secret and very much within the community. And so from the outside world, it looks like this community barely exists. There's very little account of the community, of Ismaili history, of Satpanthi history from non-Ismaili or non-Satpanthi records. Yeah, most of the scholars, Azim Najir, Ali Hassani, Zawahir Moat, Azim Qasim, etc., they have written about the history of Satpanth from Ginans and from Satpanthi accounts. So I'm going to take a step back and say, actually, there is this Matia rebellion of 1685 gives us this extraordinary moment when we see the Satpanth as being something much larger, as being something that has the potential to almost bring down the Mughal Empire, as having the potential to harness the energy and the aspirations of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of people who had that belief and who believed in it so strongly that they were willing to come out and face the wrath, face the might of the Mughal Empire. In a way that was suicidal. They were all massacred at the end, right? And they did so, and here's where I'm going to make the most crucial point. They did so in the name of Imam Ali. They chanted Dam Ali as they were moving through the streets of Baruch. That was their chant, that was their form of zikr, that was their form of declaring their allegiance as Shias and declaring their allegiance to the Satpanth, to the Ismaili tradition, and to the Shia tradition, all at one go. And so I'm going to show you, I hope, that by highlighting this account by outsiders, we get a window into how the Satpanth appeared as a revolutionary force in the history of India, if not beyond, right? So now the chant that they were making was Dam Ali. Now, Dam Ali literally means on the breath of Ali, that Ali is on my breath, Dam Dam Ali. And you might remember this is also a common chant that is among Sufis, that Hazrat Ali, Imam Ali is, you chant his name because that enables you to almost amalgamate your breath and your own existence with that of devotion to Hazrat Ali. And so during this rebellion, by chanting Dam Ali, it's almost like they are agents of Imam Ali, right? So the Mughals are seeing this as, oh my goodness, these guys are not only rebels, they are Shia rebels, and that's what the emperor hates. And so we must exercise the utmost brutality against them. But for the Matyas, they didn't care. They were going to chant to Ali, and thus they are going to make their allegiance completely known. And here, because we have this account from a Dutch guy, there is no question of him taking sides. There's no question of him having either a Shia or Sunni allegiance. He's just reporting the events as he saw them, right? So we are seeing that they're coming out. They are breaking taqiyya. They are coming out in the open as adherents of Imam Ali. Um, we Now, of course, again, to this audience, I do not have to explain what the Ginans are. Um, sorry. Um, they are a living part of the tradition of all Ismailis who come from the South Asian tradition and even beyond. But once again, just to kind of give you a sense of how the Ginans have been interpreted and understood by different scholars. Again, I've chosen the same three scholars, some of the most important scholars of the Ginan tradition. And now, while the Ginans are such an important part of the South Asian Ismaili tradition, devotional hymns, ways of, again, it's a way of recalling and internalizing, making faith a bodily practice, making faith and ritual a practice that is carried out every single day in many different contexts as you move through the day, as you move through your life. But here I'm going to show you that the zikr of Imam Ali that is practiced by the Matiyas is also in a similar way being used by the Satpanthis, by the Matiyas, as a way of again doing that same exercise of internalizing and embodying their devotional practices. Um, so who was this leader of the Matiyas, and how does he appear in the sources that we are looking at over here? Now, the Dutch reporter is giving us a lot of information, and he is very clearly very impressed by Nur Muhammad and the kind of control and the kind of influence he has over the Matiyas who have occupied the fort of Bharuch. He is a peasant. He's a young man. When the fort is captured, the first thing that they do is they plant a red flag on the fort. I'm still kind of figuring out what is the significance of the red flag for Satpantism or Ismailis. If you have any thoughts, please do share them with me. We hear that Nur Muhammad was a charismatic leader, and he acknowledges, as the Dutch guy says, he acknowledges neither prince nor king, only Ali. Once the Matiyas had captured the fort and had looted all the Mughal treasury that is within the fort, they started to give it away. They don't hold on to it. They give it away to people who are needy. They give it away to beggars. They give it away. His followers were only allowed to keep what they had brought from home, right? Any goods that the Matiyas plundered were returned to the people that they belonged to. So there's a very strong sense of ethics here, a strong sense of how a good government should function. They should not plunder from the people. It should, in fact, give the money to them. So there's almost like a redistribution of wealth going on in this short period of 10 days when the Matiyas are in charge of Bharuch. And that suggests that there is a coherent ethical world that they are part of, which has a strong allegiance to Shi'i and Ismaili traditions of loyalty, of hierarchy. And so while these allegiances and this way of behaving might have been practiced by these communities in private, and would have been only known to the community because they keep these beliefs and practices very, very private. In this moment of rebellion, they become visible to the Dutch guys and to everybody who is watching at that time, right? So you see that this Satpanthi Ismaili notion of austerity, of ethics, of loyalty, that is being demonstrated in their actions, not just in what they say. They said that their priority was to keep the trade running. They did not want to harass or persecute any of the merchants, whether they were the English, whether they were the Dutch, whether they were the Hindus or the Jains. They wanted to protect the merchants and keep the trade running. Their anger was only towards the Mughal officials. Civilians were not to be harmed. So they were very careful that they would only attack the parts of Bharuch and only loot and plunder those that belonged to the Mughal officialdom, right, the treasury. Um, the This is something that was enormously dangerous at that time. As we have seen, the Bohra Sayyidna had been killed. There were many, many examples of Aurangzeb targeting Shias for their beliefs, for their practices. And so they surely would have known that this is a tremendously terrifying thing to do, to not just go out and chant the name of Ali, but to also carry out these activities where their ethical world, their inner ethical world is revealed and is made clear to the people who are they are fighting against. Yeah. And here's where the Dutchman is very clear about what he's saying. He says these guys had no fear for death. They, in fact, almost welcomed death. They had decided to come to express their extreme anguish, and they didn't mind if they would die in the process. Right? They were laying their lives down for their Imam Shahi Satpanthi lineage and for their teacher, Sayyid Shahji. They even women were participating in this kind of sacrifice of life that was going on. With cheerful countenance they would go and meet their death. But again, very carefully, they did not hurt the normal people, the people who were just going about their lives. Yeah, and in fact. Um, it was a declaration. They declared their identity, but they also declared a political vision of what a just and uh, what good rule could look like, right? Where merchants, where ordinary people were protected, where the money that the treasury had accumulated was given to the people who were starving, and that would be a just form of government, right? So they, for 10 days, they give us a model of that. The We also hear from the Dutch reporter that the Matthias had both what he considered to be both Muslim and Hindu practices. And this is again consistent with the fact that that many of these Matthias, seem to dress like their Hindu neighbors by wearing ordinary sort of cotton clothes that all cultivators would wear. They didn't carry on their body any visible signs of their Shia belief, their Muslim belief, their Satpanthi belief, right? They seem to have what was seen by the Dutch observer as a combination of practices. And here's one little piece of information which is still the case with many Satpanthis, that when they died, they were burnt. Their bodies were cremated, but one finger would be buried, like with Muslims. And this is a practice that many Satpanthis and adherents of the Pirana uh, shrine, they still practice even today. And even when they outwardly appear to be Hindus, yeah, including many Kanbi Patels who live in the area of Pirana and in central and south Gujarat. And then a small tomb would be created around that buried finger, and that would be the way in which they would express their practices. Um, okay, so we now return to thinking about how this uh, episode in 1685, how that fits with what we know about the Satpanth, about the Imam Shahis, about Ismaili belief and practice in Gujarat at this point in time. We realize that the beliefs and practices of the Imam Shahis were very much connected to their belief in Imam Ali. Now, once again, the very few people who have written about this episode, there's the historian Aniruddha Ray, a couple of people have written about this episode. It's generally seen as, well, these people were just peasants. They had a very kind of syncretic form of belief, and that they took like bits and pieces from different tradition. They were not really very articulate. They didn't really have a very consistent or coherent form of belief or practices. They were basically illiterate peasants, and they just happened to erupt out of a sense of loyalty to their leader, right? So this episode, the Matia Rebellion of 1685, has been dismissed as being something that is carried out by just, poor illiterate people who are rebelling out of anger, and also because they are rebelling because the Mughals charge them too much in taxes. Yeah, that's another theory for why they rebelled at this point. And here's where this Dutch account enables us to completely reject that hypothesis. Yeah, we realize that not only are the Imam Shahis um, fully conscious of what they are doing, the kind of beliefs they have, the practices they have. That these are all very deliberate acts that they carry out. So chanting Dam Ali in the middle of Bharuch, in the middle of battle, is a sign of their allegiance to a very long and complex tradition. Their code of ethics again gives us clues into how they imagine their what life should be like, what an ethical life should be like, and we recognize that that while this can be seen as a way of practicing zikr, of remembering Imam Ali, that also is bound by that sort of golden thread, as it were, to the ginans that they would have practiced in their private space, right? So it's like Dam Ali is the public face of their allegiance to Imam Ali and to the Ismaili tradition. The Ginans are the private face of that, and that would be what they would recite when they were within their communities, within their Jamaat Khanas, within the spaces where they were safe and not being observed by outsiders, right? So we see this kind of these golden threads connecting these embodied practices of Ghanan and Zikr. We see after this episode, the Matiyas were massacred, Nur Muhammad was killed, the episode was put down with the utmost brutality by the Mughal officials led by the Subedar of Gujarat, Kar Talab Khan. But it did not extinguish the Satpanthi tradition, the Imam Shahi tradition, or the Ismaili tradition, right? In fact, the rebellion is one kind of episode in which they come to public notice, but after that they regrouped and the tradition does not break. Changes, of course, are made, and communities, based on their perception of threat from the outside, from the governments that they see are scrutinizing them, they make their public appearance different as per whatever is required, right? So they may appear to be Sunni Muslim as necessary, they may appear to be Hindu as necessary, but within the community itself, the practices, the practices of Ghanan and Zikr, the practices of religious observance, all of those continue, and they continue till the present day. Um, we do know that the Imam Shahi tradition, after this horrific assault, did transform itself. After after the death of Sayyid Shaji and after the putting down of the Matia rebellion, the community did split. Some of the Imam Shahis decided to become Isna Ashari Shias, some of them decided to become Sunnis, some of them became Vaishnava Hindus, but some of them also continued to retain their connection to the Satpanth and until the present day continue to maintain that relationship. Whether that is something they will acknowledge in public or not, that depends on their perception of what the risk is to them and to their belief, but that continues for until the present day. And so therefore, what I want to end by saying is that this is a process that from the time of Imam Shah and his settling in Gujarat in the 1500s, across a period of 5 centuries, there's been this kind of thin but resilient thread that has connected the world of Imam Shah to the world of Sayyid Shahji, the world of the Momins, the Momnas, the Khojas, the Matiyas, to the communities that collect in Jamaat Khanas across the world today. The people who lived around Pirana in South Gujarat, they knew and they took very deliberate decisions on navigating the shifting political climate. And at a moment of crisis, decided to make their allegiance public, even though it was at the cost of their own lives and the lives of many of their community members. But in other words, but by doing that, they also, by kind of sacrificing their lives, they also kept the community tradition alive, because their core commitments were something that the Mughals were never able to touch. They were never able to transform those, right? So this long history of the Satpanth, of the Imam Shahis, shows that while the outward form can change, but the inner allegiance persists, and that's what connects these threads over space and time. And this is how this Dutch account, from a completely neutral observer, helps us to analyze that. And so this language of devotion that they expressed in 1685 is still resonant to us. There are echoes of it in the Kinans. There are echoes of it across the world where Ismailis and Satpanthis have gone and settled down and continue to practice these embodied hymns in their daily lives even now. And through upheaval and reinventions, these compositions have helped communities reinvent themselves to maintain that continuity, I believe, in the face of almost impossible circumstances. I'm going to stop now, and this will be an opportunity for me to ask you for any questions or any feedback that you might have. Thank you so much for listening to me.
What a wonderful talk. I hope, by the way, we have 100 and a few minutes ago, we had 188 logins. On many logins, you would have multiple individuals. So there are about 250, at least 250 people who have benefited from this talk. So thank you very much for kind of sharing your knowledge with this large community, and quite a few of the people that you know and I know and who have been active in this field are online, and I'm sure this conversation will continue in their works, in their classrooms as well. So you made a huge difference here. I am pretty sure that the audience must have kind of seen a parallel between the Nizari Smiley story, the other Satpant groups, and the way kind of it continues. So coming back to, I mean, I'll take the privilege of, kind of this, I've been asked to facilitate, and I thought I would ask a couple of questions before we kind of start looking at the chat and get the questions from the audience. Um, One very, very simple questions, when you talk about Matthias, and you mentioned that they were petty businessmen, vegetable vendors, and all that. Khojas were, of course, as the narrative goes, current narrative, were seen as business communities. We know that Mormons were seen as farmers or, a farming community or, um, what always kind of, I have always had this question because when you meet Matthias, they introduce themselves as Kolis. Now for me, Koli or Koli is fisherman, right? Uh, any connection with, were they ever into fishing or were they ever fishermen or they were, why Koli? And so if you have any information, please.
Sure. Kolis in Maharashtra tend to have a concentration in the fishing community. Kolis in Gujarat tend to be more small farmers, peasants, people who often engage in work that includes kind of guiding people through different territories. So this is like, yes, Koli, Kanbi are the two communities that comprise the Matthias. Some of them are known as Patels now. So Kanbis by the 19th century start to call themselves Patels. So we have many of those. And again, as you know, those are mostly farmers. Now, the word Matya, what does that literally mean? Somebody asked in the chat as well. And there's no explanation as to exactly what it means, but Mat means belief or opinion. And we can say that Matya is just another form of saying that we have an allegiance to Satpanth, which is the true the community of truth. And so that is the kind of almost like the umbrella category within which all the South Asian communities, whether they are Nizari Ismailis, whether they are Imam Shahis, they all kind of fit within that larger sort of umbrella.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for that question. And Musa Sheikh has asked a question, and I had a similar question. So I'll club the two questions together. So for those who are from the UK, especially from London, you must have heard about the Patidar groups, Patel groups, and there are multiple. We have Satavis Patidar, we have Leva Patidar, and we have Karwa Patidar. Now, the group that we are talking about is Karwa Patidar. Now, all these Patidars, most of them kind of talk about their origin being Punjab, from Leva and Karad, and from Karad to Karadwa to Kadwa is the story that I have heard from Sri Matya Patidar Samaj of London when I was talking to some of their officers. So I asked them, why Kadwa Patidar? Because Kadwa literally means bitter and, it doesn't make sense, and they said, no, 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 we came from Karad in Punjab and that's how Karad was abbreviated to Kadwa. The question that we have is, how, do we have evidences of this community migrating from Punjab because of the persecution? And if they moved from Punjab to Gujarat because of the Muslim persecution, that's the story I have heard, then, their affiliation to Satpanthi belief doesn't go really well, right? So what is your take on this? And Musa Bhai has asked a question that I thought was equally relevant. Let me go and check. Um, uh, can you see that?
Did Sayyid Shaji proclaim himself as Imam?
I think that's what he asked. Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
The second question, his question is very short answer, and the answer is no. He does not proclaim himself as Imam. He tends, as far as I can tell, um, he he only claims the title of Pir or Sayyid, but he never claims his
Right. So the way I
title of Imam.
connected Musa Bhai to this question was because Musa Sheikh, who is our ASG member, and I have been working to trace, this origin of a small Ismaili group from Punjab, Saraiki speaking Ismailis who trace their origin back to some parts of India. So we have been trying to kind of figure out this narrative. So that's why I connected Musa Bhai to this question about Punjab. So what is your take on Punjab and origin of Punjab?
Yeah, yeah. So
I mean,
the
additionally, even Khatris of Delhi trace their origin back to Punjab,
yes.
Multan, and so we have a lot of communities in India who kind of trace back their origin, and they may be practicing various faiths currently, but they all kind of tend to go back to the same region of Punjab.
Now, the Patidar community, or which is also known as the Karnabi community, we have, as you mentioned, there's the Leva and the Kadwa branches of that. In the 19th century, they started producing a lot of histories of their origins. And among those histories of their origins, like every single community in Gujarat claims to come from somewhere else. There is no community in Gujarat except maybe Adivasis who say that we are from Gujarat. Not a single one will say that we have always been here. So with the Patidars, the story was we originally come from Punjab. One story goes that Leva and Kadwa are because they are descendants of Love and Kush,
Yeah,
the
I've heard
sons
that.
of Ram. So Leva comes from Love and Kush, Kadwa, whatever the etymology is. This is a way in which in the 19th century, when the British were doing the caste census, that they were trying to show that we belong to a slightly higher status than,
Yeah.
than the British ignorant census officer would know. So this was a way of saying that we have a very grand and a very ancient history, and this is what our background is. So I take these accounts very seriously because there is always some sort of a historical thread you can pull out among the sort of myth that the community is trying to sort of project. And one of those is that yes, there must have been migrations from Punjab, and we know that during the time of the Delhi Sultanate and the Gujarat Sultanate, a lot of the area where, if people know Charotar area in Gujarat, that was the area that was very heavily forested. And so it was the Kanbis who cleared that area and made it suitable for cotton cultivation. Right. So this is true that they were migrants and they settled in that area. And in fact, the sultans invited them to come and use their farming skills to come and clear the area and make it more economically viable. So yes, that there is probably that is the historical truth of that. Now, whether this is now the story of persecution by Muslims, I would take that with a pinch of salt. Because in fact, they were invited by Muslim sultans and they settled here under the rule of the Muslim sultans.
Perfect. So that kind of makes a lot of sense, and I tend to agree with that. There are a lot of lot of praise, by the way, of your talk. Some people are asking how to get alerted about these sessions and all that, and I'm assuming that the ASG members who are online can post the links or collect the email addresses of these individuals and put them on our database so that they receive regular updates. You can subscribe to the ASG updates. We have the website. We have a WhatsApp group, and Shiraz would be able to, hopefully, Chairman Shiraz will be able to put some links, some numbers there in the chat. So collect those numbers. But a lot of praise, Samira, for your talk. I wanted to
Should I
ask.
take a couple of questions from the
So
chat or
yeah,
leave you
let's
to?
go to the questions from the chat. One small question before we continue, and that had come to me on WhatsApp. Somebody is asking, have you had a chance to look at the literature that Matthias have produced, and does that include Ginans as the way Ginans are sung by the Ismailis?
The answer is yes. The Now, I have not done fieldwork among the Matya community, but I have done fieldwork at Pirana and collected a lot of the devotional literature that is used by the Pirana Gadi to share with the Kanbis and the Kolis, who kind of the term Matya does not seem to be used that much anymore. It's there, but it's not the most common term. So those devotional texts that you can in about 20 years ago you could buy in Pirana or you could just get for
Yeah.
free, those have the texts are almost identical to the Ginans.
Yes.
Like there's some small differences, and those differences may have increased over time because the Pirana Gadi is now trying to project a more Hindu outlook. So the Islamic elements may have been toned down a bit, but in the terms of the structure, like almost identical. There are so many Ginans that are common to them. And here's where Zawahir and I made a list of the Ginans that are common to the Imam Shahi tradition as well as the present day Ismaili community tradition, the ones that continue to be used. And the interesting thing is that many of the peers in that Shajara, in that genealogy that I show you, who are supposed to have left the Ismaili fold, their Ginans are still considered to be part of the regular Ginans that people recite.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that precise response. For the audience, a lot of these publications from the 60s, 1950s and 60s are available online. They have been archived, and Internet Archive has a good repository of those. And you can actually go and see what Samira has just mentioned, that the Ginans are like identical. There is hardly any difference. But coming back to another question from the chat, did the 1658 rebellion impact the Khojas as well, is the question.
Great question. From the Dutch sources, I don't know. From the Mughal sources, and I have one Mughal source, which is written several years later, but that does mention, because the Mughals were basically trying to find out, like, okay, we've had this Matya rebellion. We are trying to find out who these people are, what their beliefs are. Sayyid Shahji has died, so we can't ask him. So let us try to figure out based on his descendants, like who are these people, right? So one of the sons of Sayyid Shahji, whose name is Bala Muhammad Shah, he was captured by the Mughals and he was sent to Aurangzeb's court. And he was a young boy at that time. When he comes back, his stepmother Raji Tahira, she had become the head of the Imam Shahi community. And when Bala Muhammad comes and says, I should be the head, basically he was trying to take the community in a completely Sunni direction, because that is the kind of tradition that he had been receiving during his time at Aurangzeb's retinue in the Deccan.
Mm.
So yeah, so it's a sort of complex story. And then we hear from the Mughal account that there are the Momnas or the Momins who are in North Gujarat, and they are also Ismaili, that they have also the same set of beliefs. And then there is a third group, which is the Khojas or the Khwajas, as the Mughals call them. And they also are part of the same thing. So I don't think the Khojas took an active role in that precise rebellion, but the Mughals over time gradually understood that they are part of the same Satpanth, the same kind of larger umbrella.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for that answer. And that kind of explains a lot of misunderstanding about that phase of our history. There are two, three other questions. I'll quickly go through this chat. Karam Ali is saying, wonderful, nice work finding out Dutch travelogue. I think it opens another door for research. May I know who was the leader who led the conquest of Bhuj? Was the leader any relative of Sayyid Imam Shah?
Good question. And I think the answer is very distant relative, because, and I will have to get back to you from my notes on this. So I can
Yeah,
send the answer to Hussein, and he can
yeah,
share
I'll be
it
able
with
to
you.
pass it on to him. Mohammed Moledina, whom you know very well, he's been on the call from the beginning. He's our member. Uh, Professor Samira Sheikh, what incentivized you to such deep history on Ismailis? Were you brought in an Ismaili neighborhood? Um, what is your
No,
interest in this? Zawahir is one for sure.
yes.
But what else?
I was doing no, the answer is no, I was not brought up around Ismailis at all. I was brought up in Baroda, but I first became interested in Ismaili history when I was doing my MA in JNU. And that's when I read a book by the late Dr. Dominique Silla Khan, which is called Ramdev Peer and the
Yeah.
Ismailis of Rajasthan. And she showed how the worship of Ramdev Peer that is carried out in Rajasthan has a very deep history, which is a hidden history, that Ramdev Peer actually worked or was an Ismaili missionary. And that completely opened my eyes, because I realized that a lot of the groups that we mistakenly call syncretic groups, and I hate that term, because syncretic suggests that, like it's like there's a basket in which some,
Yeah.
random things have been thrown, and something comes out of it. That syncretic is a completely imprecise definition of what is going on here. People take very deliberate decisions both on what belief system to and practice system to affiliate themselves to, but also how that belief and practice system should be shown in public, right? This is not something that they do just because they're ignorant. They do it very knowingly. And so when we see that Ramdev Peer is an Ismaili missionary, we see that Goga Peer is an Ismaili missionary, we see that there are so many Ismaili missionaries who are now seen as syncretic figures followed by ignorant people. We realize, and this is the main point I want to emphasize, that the influence of Ismaili beliefs and practices is throughout South Asia. And this is where the Dutch account makes that very abundantly clear, that while, people who may show their allegiance in public, that is a fairly small number, right? And many people in
Mm.
this chat room are, of course, you are public and open followers of the Ismaili tradition. But I think we have to multiply by 20 or even 100 or maybe 1,000 the number of people who have that allegiance, but who will not share it in public, right? And so that's why we have to see Ismaili traditions as being fundamental to the way religion and practice is understood all over, at least Northwestern India, if not much, much, much wider, right? So the answer to Mr. Moledina's question is, it's when I read Dominique's book that led me to Zawahir and many, many, many years of conversation in her little apartment in Hampstead. And it's between Dominique, Zawahir, Francoise Malleson, Tazim Kasam, Ali Asani, and so on. Then I started learning like at the feet of all these teachers, Zawahir most of all. And that is what has given me this great appreciation for Ismaili history. I still come to it very much as an outsider.
So you mentioned Tazim a few times. Let me tell you something. Tazim is also the member of our, association. One, second, she is in London. She's here for a few days. She's been visiting the IIS, and we've been working together on Garbis. But interesting that you mentioned Tazim a few times. Tazim is here, and of course Zawahir, Tazim, Ali Asani, some of the names that you mentioned, Professor Malisson. Uh, you know, these individuals have contributed a lot, and of course your contribution is no less, and today's session is one more step in that direction. We would like to see you do more Gynanic studies than you are currently focusing on, but hopefully that the historical backdrop that you're working on will help some of us. A question that has been asked, I think you answered that. Rosmin asks, are moments Ismailis?
Like all the different Satpanthi communities, some of the Momins, Momnas are Ismailis, and in publicly they will declare that allegiance. Some are keep that allegiance hidden, and some have decided to go different paths. So it just depends on like you have to basically ask them. But yes,
Right.
there are of course many Momins, Momnas who are very much Ismailis.
So the next question is by Kurban, and he's asking about Zohran Mamdan, his ancestors being Khojas, and that I think we can basically, I'll take that quickly. Uh, you know, this is kind of rooted in the late 19th century history when the Khoja group kind of got divided initially between Khoja Sunnis and Khojas, and then later on Khoja Ishnasharis and Khoja Ismailis. And so Zoran's father and forefathers come from the Khoja Ishnashari branch. Um, uh, the next question is, thank you for this is, this is an interesting question. This is Modar asking, thank you for the amazing presentation. I have a question. You showed one of the paintings depicting Sayyid Shahji that includes the Hindu symbol of Brahma. How should we understand or account for the presence of these symbols in the artwork, or this particular
Great,
symbol in the artwork?
yeah, great question. And here's where I think, again, you have to recognize how careful and deliberate is the choice of symbols that is used by the Imam Shahis and Satpanthis in this context, but also in many other ways. So the reason why Brahma is chosen is because, and here is again where I dislike the word syncretic. Now, most Hindus have a allegiance to Shiva or Vishnu, but there is virtually no, there is no kind of, there are no communities that treat Brahma as the primary deity or the primary god, right? So when the Imam Shahis choose Brahma as the sort of symbol of their Indic or their devotional beliefs and practices, they are choosing a symbol, a deity who is not actually doesn't mean much to most Hindus, right? So they're choosing, they're taking the decision to to connect themselves with a deity who they can have a direct relationship with. You'll also see, some of you will have noticed the symbol Om, which was also there in that picture of Imam Shah. And if you look carefully, that symbol of Om where there is a sort of round C-like motif on the back of it, that can also be read as the Arabic letter Ain, right? And so you can read the Om also as Ali, right? And here is again a very careful and deliberate ways in which the Imam Shahis was saying we have an allegiance to Ali, but you can see that symbol as either Om or Ali based on where you are coming from, right? So it could be Om if you come from a Hindu background, it could be Ali if you come from uh, a Shi'i or a Muslim background, but the combination is what matters to them, and that is a very carefully chosen combination.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Samira. We have questions from, in fact, Tazim is online as well. I think it's TK abbreviation, which she uses, and I noticed a question from her. Karim Tharani has a question. Mira Mawani has a question. So I'll quickly run through those questions. Mira's question is simple. What do the Matyas believe in today? Karim has a request. If that list that you mentioned, that Zawahir and you had prepared, if that can be shared with him. If I think it should be in my document somewhere, but if you have it handy, if you can share it with me, I'll pass it on to Karim. Unless, I mean, if you have Karim's direct contacts, you can send it to Karim directly. But that was Karim's request. Tazim asked a question. How did the Mughals refer to these rebellious groups? Did they use Satpanth to identify these groups? Does the Dutch account use the term? And of course, I've raised Mira's question about what Matyas believe in. So if you could answer those two, please.
Okay, so the Dutch account uses the term Matia, Mathia, Mathia, Mat, so variations of that. They do not use the term Satpanth. They do use the term adherents of Ali. I can't say it in Dutch, but that is the term that is most commonly used. And a couple of other terms that signify Shi'i allegiance. That's what the Dutch account uses. Now, the Mughals used the term that was used for the rebellious groups is basically the term they would use for any rebellious groups, which is groups who engage in fitna. That's the term used generally for rebellion, fitna or fasad. But it is in the Mirate Ahmadi, which is written up good 60, 70 years after the Matia rebellion, that they identified the groups involved in the rebellion as Momins, as Momnas, Khwajas, and Matiyas, as being all part of the same sort of belief and practice system. But at the time, there is no, they're just seen as, fasadis, they're just seen as rebels. The religious allegiance is not discussed, as far as I know at this point. Sorry, what was Mira's question? What do they believe in now? So some Matiyas are now have become completely Hindu and Vaishnav. So those may may include some of the Matya Kandbis or Patidars that Hussein, you are in touch with. If you go on the internet, there's this group called realpatidar.com, and they are very, they've put a lot of material up there on the net, but their basic emphasis is to show that the Imam Shahi tradition is a Hindu tradition and not a Muslim tradition. So that's the strand that they are taking. Some of the Matyas, and that includes Kolis, Kandbis, Golas, who live in the Surat area, many such communities. They still have a very deep allegiance to the Imam. Whether it is to Hazar Imam or not, that decision they will make in only certain circumstances. But to this idea of the Imamat, to the idea of being Shi'i, to the idea of the Imam-e-Zaman, this idea is still very persistent within them, and they still very much revere the Ginans. They still use them. They still call their, what looks from the outside like a mandir, they will still call it a Jamaat Khana, and so on. So if we pin a label on them and say this is what they believe, that is impossible. because that is for centuries, this community has been trying to evade labels. So even now, we cannot put a label saying they are just this or just that, because their presentation of themselves continues to evolve, and that base is based on the threat perception that they have from the outside world.
Great. We are kind of inching towards the final deadline that I have been given. We are about 6-7 minutes from that. We have already crossed our usual for 1 hour 15-minute period. 1:30 is our final deadline. So there are some comments in the chat box, like there is a comment about the spirituality, and Altaf has made that comment. Chairman Shiraz and other members of the ASG, there are a lot of people who have requested to be added to our mailing list, and some of them have shared their email addresses and the number. I'm sure Islam Shah will preserve the chat and will be able to retrieve all that data so that we can add them as our members. Quickly, let's look at, of course, Chairman is saying that it will take a minute to join ASG. You get all ASG updates, events, webinar links, and recordings of past lectures and webinar resources if you visit the ASG site. Kurban has asked another question about Guptis in places like Bhavnagar. We have Guptis in quite a few, and here I think references to the Nizari Guptis of Bhavnagar. So the question is, where is the question? Do they belong to the same history? I think it's a shared history of Satpant that we're talking here. But these are Andharias of Bhavnagar who are recent entrants to the game. Like, it's a few generations ago that they became Ismailis. But Samira, do you want to comment on that? Guptis of Bhavnagar?
Just very briefly, again, Guptis, Professor Shafiq Virani has written about Guptis, and yes, very much part of the same larger umbrella. Whether they come within the Satpant now, 500 years ago, I mean, again, we have to all recognize that the Satpant is growing and evolving constantly, and so it would take very kind of careful fieldwork, very sensitive fieldwork, very fieldwork that is very sensitive to the political circumstances, the social circumstances, to really kind of come to an understanding of what these belief systems are in the present day. And remember that, it's not easy for anybody in India to come out and have a openly Muslim identity, forget about Shi'i or Ismaili, etc. So I would say that one way in which we can think about this is also about I think it's more useful to look at practices rather than beliefs. So what do people do rather than what they believe? So do they go to Pirana? Do they have Jamaat Khanas? Do they sing Ginans? Do they do they recite a particular kind of history? So I think that is the questions we have to ask.
Great. Thank you very much. We have a lot of IIS graduates and students who have asked their questions, and Malik Sultan has given an exclamation saying, what a fantastic, mind-blowing talk and all that. We have Uzair, whom you have met, Samira. I remember when Uzair was traveling to the US, he did request that he wanted to connect with you. And Uzair is here. He is our PhD recipient, Dr. Daftari PhD scholar. He has been associated with the South Asian Studies as an intern, and he continues to support South Asian Studies. Uzair is asking this question. Thank you, Professor Sheikh. Fascinating as always. I was wondering why the Matiyas would publicly chant Damali. There are various ways to rebel, protest, most of which may not require mention of Imam Ali, I assume. So what is it about this rebellion that would spur the Matiyas to make Imam Ali present in that moment on their breath, as it were, like that? Yeah. So why Damali?
Was a great question, and to one to which I can only offer a hypothetical answer because we don't know, and it is not a chant that is common in Ismaili communities now, as far as I know, but it is a chant that's common in, as I mentioned, Sufi communities. um, So I think the answer would be that in this moment, these Matthias wanted to make that allegiance very, very crystal clear. And they wanted to make that allegiance clear not to the Dutch guy or to the Hindu banyas or the Jain merchants who were in the fort of Bharuch. They wanted to make that point crystal clear to the Mughals. And it was in full recognition that Aurangzeb had carried out more than 40 years of persecution of Shias that they chose, that they would say, Dam Ali, it's almost like a provocation that, we are the adherents, we are the embodiments of the devotion of Ali, and we have come here to lay down our lives. So I find it a deeply moving declaration that they make, understanding that the might of the state would come down upon them. And it's almost like, let us see if you can extinguish us. And of course, they could not be extinguished, as we know from even today's situation.
Great. So quickly, we have a lot of questions and we have 1 minute. So we can't really take, but I have taken note of some of these questions. I'll pass them on. Somebody has asked, where can they buy the article that we have referred? So the 2018 article is online. You should be able to download. The one that Samira is writing on Matthias is not yet published. So hopefully it will be out soon. And then you should be able to buy it. But if you do the search on Samira Sheikh, you should be able to get it. And that's where, I'm left with a few seconds to do the uh, much needed vote of thanks. So my deep, deep gratitude to you, Samira, for taking time out of your busy schedule. We have been talking about this for almost a year now, and you've been very gracious. A lot has happened during this period in your life, and you've still decided to honor your word and be with us today. On this occasion, I kind of offer my gratitude on behalf of the Chairman Shiraz Pradhan, every member of the ASG, and all of us, all volunteers who benefit from the wonderful work that Pali Jiva started and has continued. I take this opportunity to thank our technical team, those who put the poster together, Alina, Altaf, Islam Shah has been helping us today with the Zoom recording and organizing this Zoom. So my gratitude to all of you, and the biggest thank goes to this 250 plus people who joined today on a Sunday afternoon, Sunday late night, Sunday morning from various parts of the world. I can see people right from Los Angeles, Houston, to people from Bangladesh, Malaysia. I recognize many of these names. They've been our regular supporters. So my gratitude to all of you. Wishing you a great day ahead. And inshallah, as always, once the video is ready, it will be uploaded on the ASG YouTube channel, ASG website, and we'll create an alert for all of you to know that the video is now available. So Khuda Hafiz, good night, Shabba Khair, stay safe.
Thank you so much.